Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Sunday, and welcome to episode 6 of the South Jersey Starting 9 podcast. I am Dan Wilkins, joined by my longtime co-host, David Cohen. Long time as in, 4 months now?
Yeah.
Well, we started this in December of last year, and so it's mid-March, 4 months, but, obviously we'll be getting more episodes in as the off-season winds down and as we get ready for high school baseball in the state of New Jersey. Even though practices have already started,
Yep.
today is the last day, as far as I'm concerned, the last day of the winter season for NJSIAA because the final state championship games for basketball are being played. Ocean City just picked up a state championship victory over Colonia, but David, with basketball finally winding down, we've got time to reminisce in the in the beautiful days of spring before we get into the summer. And well, right now we're dealing with 50 degrees. It's not too bad. It's not too good. But it's going to get warmer, and the baseball season will be soon upon us. But how you holding up so far? Because I haven't seen you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's going pretty well. It's definitely the quickest turnaround, as far as I know, from winter sports to spring sports, with the season being pushed back due to the MAC championships down because wrestling had to get pushed back. Everything else just got pushed back. So I'm excited for this baseball season. It's going to be really fun. There's a lot of good teams. We're going to talk about the teams we're covering coming up shortly. There's a lot of good teams on that list, and you might as well flip a coin for who's going to win these games because there's a lot of competitive teams this year.
I think one thing, you're talking about the MAC championships. For those who don't know, the wrestling championships got pushed back 1 week because of the MAAC championships. Who ended up winning that?
Sienna.
Siena, okay, out of New York. No, but Atlantic City's really been trying to revive their image, and I think a lot of people no longer see Atlantic City as like this touristy option, um, or even as a vacation destination. Because, I remember growing up, and my parents would tell me when I was growing up that Atlantic City was basically the East Coast's version of Las Vegas. And the funny thing is that Las Vegas has gapped AC in leaps and bounds in terms of the success that it's had. I mean, Vegas now has two, and they're going to have three professional sports teams in the next couple of years. They got the Vegas Golden Knights, they got the Las Vegas Raiders. Nobody's talking about professional sports teams in Atlantic City.
No.
Maybe the only one that we could talk about is the Atlantic City Surf, which I think should come back. The Sandcastle, but no, when we talk about Atlantic City, listen, college basketball coming down to Boardwalk Hall, I think is a great thing. And people are like, well, oh, why do they get to go there and New Jersey wrestling has to get the boot? Well, guess what? College basketball is going to supersede high school wrestling all day, every day. And, the reality is that wrestling is not the sport that a lot of people like to believe it is. And, listen, when we talk about South Jersey baseball, people ask me, why do you cover baseball? Why do you not cover wrestling? Well, let me tell you this. The players that we are covering on this podcast and the players that we'll be covering when we're out in the field, when we're out covering these games, they are going to be either collegiately recruited and in some rare cases, drafted into the major leagues, whether it's out of high school, whether out of college. We saw Caden Bodine, we saw Frank Chiron, Matt Ferrara, Logan Dawson. All four of those players have had at least one appearance on DWB. What is the major league for wrestling? Olympics?
Yeah, the Olympics. Or some
I
guys go.
understand that the Olympics have a big appeal, but what I'm saying is that I'm not putting down wrestling. I'm saying that it shouldn't be one sport is better than the other because of this. It's people like to punch down baseball when we talk about baseball. Oh, it's the spring. It's an easy layup, of a season. But I really think that baseball does not get the credit that it deserves, and this is part of the reason why we run this podcast is because I think it's incredibly important that we highlight this sport because it's an incredible sport. It's a sport that has heaps of talent, whether it's at the high school level, at the collegiate level, or in the professional level. I mean, one of the greatest players that has played the game of baseball in our generation, Mike Trout, is from this very area. So we would be doing a disservice not to talk about America's pastime here in the DWB studios. But we have some stuff to talk about today. Not a lot of news. I will admit, not a lot of news, but You did see in our Instagram and Twitter posts, we're going to be talking about the Colonial Conference and the Olympic Conference in today's episode. We are going to record again on Wednesday, the 18th, after St. Patty's Day, which is a great holiday, but I'm going to have plenty of Irish potatoes on Tuesday. But no, we're going to record at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 18th, and that is going to wrap up our preseason discussion going into opening day for us on March 23rd. We are also going to talk about, at some point, maybe in between talking about the Colonial and the Olympic, we're going to talk about a part of the DWB baseball schedule. There's 2 panels on Instagram. I think we're going to talk about the first, which I think runs through March 23rd to April 15th. And then maybe on Wednesday we'll talk about the second half, April 20th through May 23rd. So one thing I do want to talk about, though, is how crazy this weather has been. I mean, it's 51 today, but John Scanzano, head coach of Camden County College, he posted a picture. It's on the left side of your screen. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, but on the top is March 11th, last Wednesday, and on the bottom is March 12th, last Thursday. Blanket of snow on the field and 80 degrees up top. And we did a JUCO baseball game on Wednesday. We did it between Bergen and RCSJ Gloucester, and it was something like 75 degrees. It was beautiful. It was windy. It was everything that you would have wanted. But then the next day, I was literally sitting in that chair just off of camera, and I was looking over out the window to my left, and there was snow falling down incredibly heavily. It was really weird.
Spring sports, man.
Spring sports.
Yeah.
I am hoping that at one point we do get a DWB baseball snow game.
Speak for yourself.
Well,
man. I
listen.
do not want to be out there in the snow.
Did you see USC and Northwestern? They
Yeah.
were playing in the snow. Great. What's it called? A great ad for conference realignment. You play in Los Angeles, California, and then you got to go over to Evanston, Illinois, and play in the snow. But hey, USC, they lost one half of that doubleheader. So one thing that I'll say though is that we had a game one time before we go into talking about the Colonial Conference. One thing that was really funny to me was the first time I ever went up to Citi Field in New York, home of the Mets. It was like April 2018. It was like 40 degrees, and we're driving up to New York. Got a hotel over on the other side of the bridge, and I get a notification as we're pulling into the parking lot of this hotel that the Phillies-Mets game that day was postponed due to the snow. It was April 1st, I think, of 2018. And I just thought it was so funny. I was like, "Are you kidding me? We're getting not a rain out. We're not getting a rain out. We're getting a snow out of a game." So that sent in a huge panic to our family. We had to book an extra night in the hotel room in New York, in Queens, and at the end of the day, we ended up getting what we wanted. But actually, we didn't get what we wanted because the Phillies got shut out by Matt Harvey. Phillies got shut out by Matt Harvey, and it is what it is. But you win some, you lose some, and that's the risk you take when you go and see your favorite team on the road. Let's talk a little bit about the World Baseball Classic too. That's been I've loved watching it. I watched Wilyer Abreu throw his bat about 2 miles in the air last night, and one of the things that's been really interesting to talk about in this WBC, there's been a few talking points. One has been, how often should this tournament be held, and should it be recurring more often? And my answer to that is no, because as much as I think people would in theory like to see the WBC every year, I think that the magical moments that we are getting from this tournament are because it only happens every 3 to 4 years. When we had it in 2023, that was the first time in 6 years. I think it might have been, wait, am I doing my math wrong? I think I am. But it was 2017 and then 2023. That's a long gap. There would have been one in 2020, but then COVID shut everything down. So, as much as I think that the World Baseball Classic is a beautiful thing, and it's the best thing that has happened to baseball this year, especially with the CBA and lockout looming for Major League Baseball, I think that people get a little bit ahead of themselves when they say, "Oh, I'd love to see this every year." Because would you watch it every single year? I think that the TV ratings would probably suggest otherwise, and I think that people would eventually get a little bit burned out from it. Would you agree?
I would agree. Yeah, I think 3 years is a little weird. I mean, like the Olympics are every 4 years, but I would rather have it 2 or 4 years, every 2 or 4 years. Um, but three is fine, I think, right now. But like you said, the CBA agreement and the lockout are looming, and MLB has to try their best to avoid that because baseball is growing. I mean, like we see Team Italy in the World Baseball Classic. Nobody thought they were going to be in the semifinals, let alone get out of the pool play stage. But baseball over in Italy continues to grow. Baseball here in the United States is at the top of its level right now, and that's why this lockout cannot happen. It's going to kill baseball. We saw it in NHL when they had their lockout. The numbers there, even though they're not as high as baseball,
They weren't as high to begin with.
yeah, they trend down still, and that's going to happen with baseball.
I think that's the difference between a partial lockout and a full lockout. Like, for example, 1994, Major League Baseball played about 80% of their season. Then they get the strike in, I think it was mid-August. World Series gets canceled, and that hurt baseball tremendously. But then 4 years later, it all comes rushing back with the home run race of Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire.
Yep.
That captivated the country, really, and really baseball rebounded into what it was in the early 2000s. But the thing is that at the time, what's really funny is that after Major League Baseball came back from that strike in 1994, then a super team formed in the New York Yankees because they made the World Series in 1995. They made it again in 1997, and then they won three straight in 98, 99, and 2000, two of those being sweeps. And in 2001, they made it, took Arizona to 7 games, and it took that miracle, Luis Gonzalez, the walk-off hit, to win it. But then they made it again in 2003, and so counting up 1995 to 2003, that's countless World Series appearances and 4 rings to go along with what they've been doing. That it's funny that it came after a strike, not
Yeah,
before.
now it's coming
But now it's
before.
becoming
Yeah.
before because of the Dodgers and the deferred money and one thing as well is that when you lose an entire season due to a strike or a contract negotiation, it sets the sport back decades in terms of fan relationships and in terms of the general populace's grasp on the sport. You were talking about the NHL. 04-05 was the season that got locked out. I couldn't tell you a single NHL finals that happened from 2006 to 2009. And the only way I remember 2010 was because the Flyers were in
Yep.
it and they lost to the Chicago Blackhawks. And then honestly, I really couldn't remember anything going up until 2015-ish. Maybe 2014 with the Los Angeles Kings. But in hockey, a sport that is relatively considered fourth of the American four major sports, some have even argued that they don't even deserve to be in the fourth spot, which I disagree with. But hockey is a sport that needs all the help that they need, and a season that locked out set the sport back for another 5 to 10 years. The NFL didn't have a full season lockout, but I think it was 2011 that they had one that extended into the regular season, and then they had the ref shortage that happened in 2012, the Fail Mary, as they like to call it, the infamous Aaron Rodgers play that got erroneously called a touchdown. But the NBA has had lockout seasons. They've had seasons where not a full season is played. I think it happened in 2011. That's how the Charlotte Bobcats ended up winning 7 games that year. They went 7-62. And then Major League Baseball didn't have their season too badly affected in 2022. But I remember the 2022 season for how close we were to getting into the regular season. I think the agreement was signed like March 10th. And the issues that persisted at the time are far more blown up today than they were 4 years ago. So if we were worried about a long-term lockout in 2022, the offseason of 2021 into 2022, well, people are talking about a lockout basically a full year, if not more than a year before the contract expires. That's what scares me, is
Yeah.
that you rarely hear people linger about this fearfulness of a contract or a CBA or a unions agreement. you rarely hear it come up this early. Usually you'll only hear about the contract dispute after it's already started. I think that's how worrisome people can and should be about it.
Yeah, well, I think people are so scared about it is because you're coming off one of the best World Series in recent years. Last year between the Blue Jays and the Dodgers, even though the Dodgers won and people didn't like that because of the deferred money you mentioned and stuff like that, and how they're building a super team. But baseball is climbing, and I think that's why people are scared because for the NHL, they're trying to get their numbers up. They got it up with the Four Nations face-off and the recent Olympics. But what is baseball going to do if they go to a lockout when they come back? What are they going to do? The diehard fans are going to watch. That's not the question. But
Yeah.
how are you going to keep the casual fans around when you come back out of the
Mhm.
lockout?
Yeah, and you were talking about the World Series. Yes, the Dodgers winning was something that I think fueled a lot of the talk of anti-competitive baseball. But I'll use an analogy, or before I get to that, I'll say that the 2025 World Series was one of the best that we've had in the last 20 years. Goes to a game seven, goes to extra innings, go ahead home run by Miguel Rojas. That was amazing. But I'll use an analogy for the sense of there's not a lot of people that are fans of NASCAR in South Jersey, but I am one of them. And I'll say that while they haven't had contract disputes that have, set the sport back, they have had decisions made that have set back the sport. And it's always an uphill battle trying to get casual fans to watch. I will watch almost every week. Not every week, but most Sundays. Like the race is going on right now. I'm not watching it, um, but what I'll say is that it is always a discussion point in discussion circles of NASCAR and auto racing is how do we get the casual fan to watch? How do we get the average Joe Schmo to watch? Because everybody did in the mid 2000s. Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Tony Stewart, Dale Earnhardt Jr. They were huge superstars. They were actually household names, and they were getting recognition in pop culture. They were appearing in movies. They were appearing in high-level commercials. You really don't see that nowadays. There's maybe only a handful of NASCAR drivers that the average person could name off the top of their head, and that would mean that they're active and driving today. And really, the only one that would be incredibly casual would be Chase Elliott because he's the son of the most popular driver of all time, and Bill Elliott. So, to make that analogy for baseball, in 2017, NASCAR introduced stage racing to try to lure in the average fan more. And basically, you split the race. Let's say the race is 200 laps at, say, Daytona. You would split the race into three stages. They would do 50, 50, and 100. That makes for 200 laps, 500 miles. That made it, or at least they tried to make it more appealing to the average fan by doing it in those three-stage cycles so that you get more breaks and you're not running through 200 laps continuously. Is it something that I have disagreed with ever since it was implemented? Absolutely. But just like how I may have my disagreements with the pitch clock or with the ghost runner on second base or with any of the other rules that have been implemented in Major League Baseball, it is not a rule that is designed for people like me or people like you.
No.
It is a rule designed for people that do not regularly watch the game and they want to get more of those people in. And I don't think that as a collective community of fans that we should be gatekeeping baseball. It is America's pastime. It is a sport that was one of the first to integrate with Jackie Robinson in 1947. And it was one of the first to really be pioneers in the age of broadcasting. The first ever radio broadcast was of a baseball game. The first ever television broadcast was of a Pittsburgh Pirates game in 1939. First ever televised sports broadcast, I should say. It was of a Pittsburgh Pirates game in 1939. What I'll say is that this is a sport that rides the coattails of a lot of other sports when it comes to social media popularity. The NFL and the NBA, they are leagues and organizations that have the grasp of social media. But Major League Baseball hasn't really found their way in appealing to that demographic entirely. So if they can do that, if they can tap into that more, make this a players league, something that highlights individual player talent, just like in the NBA, people are more fans of Steph Curry than they are of the Golden State Warriors, or people in the NFL are more fans of Patrick Mahomes than they are of the Kansas City Chiefs. Major League Baseball doesn't have to go all the way in that direction, but if they can at least make this season a good one, a great season before the 2027 lockout, it gives me at least a little bit of hope that this sport can remain popular.
Agreed, and I hope there's a good season. I love baseball. Obviously, we're doing this podcast, but baseball, you have to avoid that lockout, like I said, because you are going to lose so much interest in the sport. The casual fan, since those rules that you mentioned got implemented, you can't lie about numbers. The numbers are up. I mean, like, you're drawing in, even in extra innings, you're drawing in casual fans to see that high level of entertainment and excitement with the ghost runner. Baseball has to figure out a way. They have to get on board with the owners and figure out a way to avoid this lockout.
Well, it's all great points made, but we do have to play a full season first, and for our subject matter, we do still have to talk about two conferences today. We're going to talk about the Colonial Conference and the Olympic Conference. We're going to start with the Colonial, then we're going to take a little bit of a brief break, and for those curious, yes, this is going to be a bit of a longer episode, but we do have to cram in a lot of content before we get into the opening day of March 23rd. So let's not waste too much time, though, and let's talk about the top Colonial team from last year, 24-6, Group 2 sectional champion, the Haddonfield Bulldogs, led by Justin Singleton. Went 24-6 last year, 7-1 in the Colonial Liberty. They made it to the Diamond Classic Championship as a 24 seed and knocked off the likes of Shalleck, Eastern, St. Augustine, and Cherokee to make it to that final. And then they ended up winning the Group 2 sectional championship, taking care of Oakcrest, Lower Cape May, West Deptford, and Collingswood. And listen, they probably would have made the state championship if they didn't run into the first undefeated team in 20 years in Chris Roof's Governor Livingston. So for Haddonfield, a relatively light senior class, a lot to like about the Bulldogs.
Agreed. I mean, like, they graduated a couple of top kids and Martin Falls and behind the dish, Griffin Clark. But this Haddonfield team is stacked, or well coached under Singleton. Pitching-wise, James Rowe, Will Solak. Rowe had a 1.43 ERA last year, and Solak a 1.81. Two guys under a 2 ERA. That's outstanding. And Group 2 is just getting better and better every year. We're going to talk to some more of these teams in both conferences. Haddon Heights, Collingswood, Seneca, teams like that have climbed Group 2 to the top level. But for the hitting side, Haddonfield as well, Timmy Bowman, Jackson Gayer, Dan Keenan, they got the guys to do the damage. And when teams see Haddonfield on their schedule, it's going to be circled for that team. They're going to want this win. It's big power points online. It's going to be, because Haddonfield's going to be another top team throughout South Jersey this year. And I think Coach Singleton knows that. He knows teams are going to be out for blood against Haddonfield. It happens every year. Any team that wins the sectional championship or has a great year, you're circled, and you're that person's top dog.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Haddonfield is a team that whether Bob Bickle is the head coach or whether Justin Singleton's the head coach, they have always had success. I mean, just going back 15 years, they made the Group 2 final in 2011, and they lost to Buna. Made it in 2015, lost to Buna. Had a 24-win season. 2019, they go 22-4, undefeated in the Colonial Liberty, and then they lose to West Deptford. But they had another sectional championship in 2018, beat Point Pleasant Borough, and then fell to Raritan. So, I think that this Haddonfield team, they definitely spent maybe a year or two kind of in the shadows once Bob Bickle retired after 2022. They went 8-11 in his last year, and they were a number 14 seed, lost to Haddon Heights in the first round. Justin Singleton has done an amazing job in his first 3 years. They went 15-8 in his first year, made it to the Group 2 semis, lost to Seneca. 2024, they go 13-9. They lost in the second round, but they seemed like they were improving. And then they go from 13-9 last year to 24-6, same record that they had when they won the sectional championship in 2018. So, listen, I'll give them all the credit. I also think that they're a team that I think is a little bit unique with their scheduling, because they do like to schedule a lot of big schools, but they do like to schedule a lot of out-of-town Central Jersey opponents. They played Watchung Hills on opening day in 2024, and they also played them in 2023 as well. So 2025, they played two Colonial Valley teams. They played Allentown and Hamilton West in a weekend. This is a team that Also played three Olympic opponents back to back in RV, Lenape, and Shawnee, and they literally played 5 non-conference games in a row. It definitely was a little bit of a weird season for Haddonfield, but listen, 2.59 ERA, 322 average as a team. This team is pretty stacked and also pretty deep in terms of what they have. They have guys like Owen Ryan, who could definitely bump up his numbers this year. Only had 29 at bats as a junior. Jackson Singleton, a freshman, went rather 5 for 12.
A lot of speed in him.
Yeah, a lot of speed in him. And Will Solak also had 7 stolen bases. This is a team that only stole 46 bases and only hit 4 home runs. 3 of them came from Adam Ross. And part of that you can attribute to Haddonfield being in a super pitcher-heavy park in Russ Spicer Diamond. It's like 404 to center, I think, right up there with Cherry Hill West. But, listen, Haddonfield is another team that it's a two-dog race, I think, in the Colonial Liberty. And while I think that the other 3 teams in there, Collingswood, Haddon Heights, and West Deptford, I think they will do well, I'm looking at the Colonial Liberty, and 3 of the top contenders in South Jersey Group 2 are in the same division. Yeah. Haddonfield, Collingswood, and Haddon Heights. And then you could argue West Deptford as well. There's a lot going on, and I think that really it's going to be intriguing to see how Haddonfield works it out.
Well, I think Group 2 is so hard to predict because you're mentioning all these teams in the Colonial Liberty that are in Group 2. They see each other 2 times a year and then could see each other in the Diamond Classic for a 3rd time and potentially a 4th time in the playoffs. They know each other so well, and that's why you see some of these upsets, and you're like, how did they beat? Well, they know the teams. That's why they beat them. But yeah, it's going to be a top dog race. I think Haddon Heights is going to make a jump this year, even more of a jump this year in the Colonial, and our next team, Audubon, too.
We're going to talk about the Audubon Green Wave as well, my alma mater. They went 20-8 last year under Rich Horan, who has solidified his legacy. I mean, he solidified his legacy for a long time as one of the best head coaches in South Jersey history. But one of the things about Audubon is that they are such a baseball town. I mean, we're recording in Audubon today, but it's one of those things where I think people doubt a team after having a big senior class, but then sometimes they just figure it out anyway. This is a team that's very well coached. Again, Richie Horan, over 600 wins in his long career with the Green Wave, former Gloucester Catholic assistant, and has found his way to be a legend on the diamond for Audubon. But they had a definitely a little bit of a rocky May. They were 11-3 going into May. They won 4 or 5 games in Myrtle Beach, but then they made it all the way to the quarterfinals of the Diamond. They beat EHT, they beat Kingsway, fell to Mainland in the quarterfinal round, but they definitely had some tough stretches in the month of May. They lost to Collingswood and Haddonfield, 2 of the toughest teams in their division, coming right up to the playoffs. But again, we talk about the result. They made the South Jersey Group 1 final. They were looking for their first sectional championship since 2017. They lost 4-3 to Shalleck in a heartbreaker. But one of the things I'll say about Audubon is that even though they had a senior class of 13 players, I think that this team is one that when you've had one under 500 season in your 30 years of coaching Audubon baseball, I think that you can say with good enough confidence that Audubon will find a way to right the ship. And that one season, by the way, was 2005. They went 6-16. That was almost unheard of. But I remember in 2023, they said, well, 2023 was a big class. Let's see how 2024 is. It might not be that good. Big class of seniors graduated in 2024, and they said, well, Audubon might not be good next year because they graduated a whole bunch of seniors. But then 2025 comes around, they graduate 13 seniors. I am, dare I say, call me biased, I don't really care. I am reluctant to say that Audubon will have a down year. I'm reluctant to say it because I think that you just look at the history, you look at the numbers. In high school, a team can be so well coached that it causes you to win games. It's not like it's entirely reliant on the players. Yes, they have to get their jobs done, but sometimes a coach can be so good and make so many good decisions that it can bring you in that way. But let's talk about Audubon. 1.86 ERA. I think their highlight was pretty fair and square in the pitching department. They had the big trio of seniors that graduated last year, Lance Furness, Nick Caladros, and Gabe McCracken. Caladros and McCracken now teammates over at Rutgers Camden. and Gabe McCracken won Rookie Pitcher of the Week in the NJAC last week. So they do have a good amount of guys to back them up. They got Chase Bozarth, who I really like. He's got a good zipping fastball. He's got definitely a taller frame, somebody who can command downward in the zone. But then you have two freshmen. You have Matt Brogley and you have Evan Paxos. The latter of whom, Paxos, 25 and a third innings and a 1.66 ERA. Didn't strike out a lot of guys. Definitely a contact pitcher, but somebody that for an Audubon team that is losing pretty much the core of their hitting, they're going to have to fall back on their pitching staff this year.
Agreed. I mean, like they graduated. You're in a Group 1 school. You're going to graduate a lot each year, and Audubon has done that for the last 3 years, as you mentioned. But because they're so well coached, I'm not counting this team out. They're going to compete in the Colonial. They're going to compete in Group 1. The Group 1, another group that's hard to predict. I mean, like Pittman, they might have a down year this year. They have been struggling all over. But for Audubon, they're going to have to rely on the pitching. Evan Paxos, as a freshman, to do that as a freshman is something. I think he even has a bigger step up in his sophomore year. The offense, that's the question mark. Where do they get that? Tyler Wiltsey graduated. He's at Rutgers now.
And getting playing time there, too.
So that's the question mark. I don't know how they do that. Where does the offense come from? But the pitching, I mean, like everybody says pitching wins championships. And that's kind of a cliche, but Audubon, they got to figure out the offense to be good this year.
One thing that I'll say, I think their two best hitters returning are Connor Chester and Cade Schofield.
Agreed.
I mean, I am a huge fan of what Cade Schofield is able to do. He is so quick on his feet defensively, but also he's got a quick bat, too. Gets it right through the zone. Really, really solid hitter. Hit 282 last year, but he also had 12 walks. Second on the team in walks, had 24 hits. He's a transfer from Highland, came over here for his sophomore year. And now he's in his junior season. So as a class of 2027 guy, he's already establishing his mark in Audubon as a shortstop, as somebody who, like last year, for example, before Tyler Wiltsey became a senior, he was playing shortstop because there really wasn't anybody there that could take his place. His primary position is center field. So when he became a senior and Cade Schofield came in as a transfer, Schofield took up short, and Wiltsey played center field, and Schofield did phenomenal over there. And then Connor Chester, don't be fooled. Do not be fooled by the 196 average. He had 2 home runs. He's only going to get stronger. He's 6'5", also pretty powerful forward on the basketball team as well. Those are 2 players that going into 2026 and eventually into 2027 that are going to be some pretty solid stars for Audubon. And listen, Schofield's going to bring the contact and the defense. Chester's just going to bring the pure power. And in a hitter-friendly park like Audubon, I mean, left field is a little bit more pitcher-friendly, but if he can drive the ball to center, if he can drive the ball to right center, Chester's going to be a phenomenal player. And I think that Audubon, like I said, I know I sound biased. I can hear the gears turning in my head that I sound biased because I went to Audubon and I covered them for 4 years. But my thinking is that Rich Horan is so successful as a coach that I don't really see an avenue to where even if they don't go to the sectional championship, even if they don't win more than 15 games, they're still going to finish over 500, and they're still going to have at least somewhat of a strong run because that team pride is just so fervent there that I don't really see a path otherwise.
You can't count them out. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
I mean, like
don't count them out until results say otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're wrong and they have a terrible year, we're definitely going to get clipped on.
Yeah, I definitely am.
But Audubon, they're just like we said, they're going to have to figure out that offense. If they do, they're going to compete.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Haddon Heights. 16-10 last year, finished third in that Colonial Liberty Division. But we were talking about, when we mentioned Haddonfield, we talked about Haddon Heights and Collingswood and West Deptford. One of the things that Audubon is playing interesting with is that there are 0 Group 1 teams in their division. Everybody else is Group 2. And Haddon Heights, they were a team that was so good to start the year. I had them like top 10 or 15 in South Jersey at the end of April. They were 11-2 at the end of April, and then they go on a streak where they lose 7 of 8 games, and a lot of them very heavy games that definitely were against tough opponents, but it didn't set them up for the best run. I mean, they beat Seneca in the first round. They beat Overbrook in the second round, but neither of those games were all that easy. And then they get run-ruled by Collingswood, lost 11-0 to the Panthers in the semifinal. So that set up a 1v6 sectional final. The way that I see Haddon Heights, I think that they have a lot of potential. Eric Newell has coached them very well. I mean, listen, they were runner-up in 2 sectional championships in 2023 and 2024, as you would know very well. But looking at those seasons, they were 21-7 in 2024, and they were 18-8 in 2023. And in 2022, the year that they had John D. Costanzo and a lot of different great talents like Drew Harris, Garrett Gordy, Timmy Shell, who had a 0.6 ERA that year. They went 22-8 that year. Eric Newell, post-COVID, has not had a season with 10 or more losses before this year. So going 16-10, partially because of that losing streak in May, listen, I think that Haddon Heights is a great team, but they definitely fall under the category of you got to play better when it matters most. During that 7 of 8 game losing streak, they lost to Delsey, Haddonfield twice, Audubon, RV, Northern Burlington, and West Deptford. The only team on that list that I say that Haddon Heights is objectively better than is West Deptford. And they went 3-5 in the Colonial Liberty. And I think that in the Colonial Liberty, you talk about the structure of the standings, and you only have 5 teams. There's not a lot of divisions in baseball that only have 5 teams. So, you usually have at least 6, maybe 7 or 8. Haddon Heights, they're a team that if they want to compete with Haddonfield and Audubon, you got to get it started early, and you have to stay on the gas pedal the entire way through. I do like a lot of their younger players. I think Ryan Gavito and C.J. Loveledge, great freshmen turning into sophomores this year. You got Colin Camerotti, didn't have too much of a sample size, but I saw him in a showcase, and he did a really good job. But the biggest player that they're losing is Nolan Latchall, who hit .347, had 2 home runs, 23 stolen bases for Haddon Heights, and in a pretty small senior class, might be a chance for them to leapfrog Audubon.
Yeah.
And compete for the title with Haddonfield.
First off, this is another small school that plays a tough schedule. I mean, like they played Rancocas Valley and played Northern Burlington last year, 2 bigger-sized schools than them. But for Haddon Heights to get back to the sectional wins that they had in previous years, this is do or die. I mean, this senior class, you have, like Jack Nichols, he's a junior, but
committed to Tennessee.
Yep.
That's the big star. He's the big star on this team.
Kevin Clark, I really like him. His arm behind the plate is really strong. He's also good on the offensive side. Jackson Mata in the outfield and at the plate. Haddon Heights, their senior class is really deep this year. They have a couple juniors that can play too, and the sophomores that you mentioned. But Haddon Heights, the leapfrog Audubon and Haddonfield, like you said, they have to stay on the gas pedal. They had a really good start and then kind of trend downwards, and I didn't think they expected to get mercy ruled by Collingswood in that semifinal.
I don't think anybody expects to get mercy ruled in a semifinal.
Well, true, but Haddon Heights, they definitely wanted to get to the sectional final last year, and it just didn't happen. And obviously, Haddonfield went on to that state semifinal, like we mentioned. But Haddon Heights, they got to stay on the gas pedal this year if they want to leapfrog their 2 biggest rivals.
Well, to talk about Jack Nichols for a second, I mean, first of all, it's incredibly impressive that he is a Tennessee commit. He's going to do Haddon Heights very proud. They have a strong history, but he had a 4.73 ERA last year, and he only pitched 4 times in the month of April. He ended up getting way more reps down the second half of the stretch when he ended up really getting into his own. He had a bit of a rough April, but he had 2 2/3 shutout versus Timber Creek, 5 innings versus West Deptford, and probably his best performance versus Collingswood in the last day of April, 6 1/3, 3 walks, 6 Ks. I think that part of what makes Jack Nichols such an intriguing prospect is his velocity. He did a throw at BPC, Baseball Performance Center, and I think he hit 97, something like that. And for him to be so projectable as a class of 2027 guy going into his junior year, he's going to definitely catch a lot of eyes if he can get that fastball in command. But Haddon Heights has an all-dirt infield. So where they're scouting him is probably coming from showcases and whatnot. And, listen, Haddon Heights plays with what they have, and it's a decently pitcher-friendly park. But, we talk about Gloucester Catholic. They've got basically a flat ground on their hill.
Yeah.
It's not their fault. That's just how it is. And it would be a lot of money to replace it, just like it would be a lot of money for Haddon Heights to get, the grass cut out of their infield, and they, have to replant a lot of things. But to make a point to Haddon Heights and to make a point to their success, this is another team that has been successful despite large senior classes. So I am excited for what they can do with a small senior class because this is a little bit different. Last year, or rather 2 years ago, 2024, they had Jake Rice, Drew Harris. Jake Rice is now at RCSJ after having a year at Wagner in Staten Island. Drew Harris, who's at George Washington University. Austin Boker, who was a nice power bat. Cameron Simon, who was a really good defensive catcher. And then they had Nichols as a freshman, but then they also had Matt DiMatteo, who was a strong pitcher, and Matt Rotolo, who ended up being a class of 2025 guy. So Haddon Heights is a little bit like Audubon in the sense that they're very locally grown. There's not a lot of kids that come from outside and go to play at Haddon Heights. So they use the people that they have, and it seems to be working out for them well. So I'm excited to see Haddon Heights this year, and I think that they're gonna succeed. But I think you're absolutely right. This is a prove it year for the Garnets.
Yeah, they're really well coached over there, and they got to get over this hump as soon as possible because, like you mentioned, it's a prove it year. But going back to Jack Nichols, he didn't start that first round game against Seneca in the first round playoffs. Came in relief and threw 4 shutout innings. I think Haddon Heights, from my vantage point, it looked like they were trying to save him for the second round against Overbrook, but they kind of felt they were on the ropes against Seneca. They lost to him the previous 2 years. They definitely didn't want that to happen again. So they go
in the first round, no less.
Yeah, they go to one of their top arms. It would have been a 15-2 at that. So they go to one of their top arms and they shut him down. The offense really picked it up after that. But it's a prove-it year for Haddon Heights, and they're going to need some improvement with the seniors they lost.
Let's talk about the team that finished runner-up in South Jersey Group 2, the Collingswood Panthers, led by Coach Brad Klein. Went 17-10 last year. I want to make a correction. Collingswood finished third in the Colonial Liberty. Haddon Heights was just a game behind. But for a team that finished 3-5 in divisional play last season, to go to a sectional championship, I think Collingswood surprised everybody last year. Just a few years ago, I mean, they weren't that great in 2021 or 2022. I mean, Brad Klein has really turned this program around in the 10 or some years that he's been here. 2019 they were 7-12. 2021 they were 3-17. Not even kidding you. And then they go 7-15 in 2022. 2023, it's 15-11. That was the turnaround that I really noticed. And then 2024, they go 16-10, and then 2025, 17-10. Last year and this year weren't all that different. They lost in the semifinal to Haddon Heights in 2024, and then they mercy ruled Haddon Heights 11-0. In fact, they mercy ruled all of their opponents going into the sectional final, where they lost 10-1 to Haddonfield. They beat Middle Township by 13. They beat Manchester Township by 15, and then they beat Haddon Heights by 11. To have 3 straight shutouts in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs is incredibly impressive, and it was led by Miles DeVincentis last year, who's now at nationally ranked Rowan in Division III. So my big thing is that they do have a lot of offense, but they are one of those teams that combines good offense with good pitching, and when you have both of those working together in a hitter-friendly park, you can't really be stopped. And for Haddonfield, the guys that are going to be backing them up, Colin Cairns had a 1.5 ERA last year. Jairo Mendoza, good two-way player, great power bat, had 6 home runs for the Panthers, but also had a 3.25 ERA in 36 innings. And to have a two-way guy like Mendoza, he's going to be really fun going into his senior year.
Yeah, for Collingswood, I'm not worried about the offense. They have guys that can smack the ball all over the field. But the pitching is the top concern. Miles DeVincentis was amazing, and I know nobody wanted to face him, especially from the left side. To have a lefty ace like that is just unbelievable. But Mendoza, 3.25 ERA, like you mentioned last year. He's good on the offensive side. He's going to see more innings with the loss of DeVincentis. But Collingswood, they're going to have a tough test in this division. This division's really good. It's top heavy. Gloucester, the next team we're going to talk about, they kind of had a down year last year, but maybe they'll step it up. This is going to be a competitive division at that.
It's going to be a competitive conference, and yeah, Collingswood, they only had 4 pitchers, actually 5 pitchers, who recorded more than 15 innings, and then you had Jacoby Klein who had 15, and you had Max Hess who had 16. I really liked Hess's delivery and what he was able to do, but he graduated this year, so. Going into it, though, Haddonfield's got a lot of power. Collingswood's got a lot of power. 6 home runs from Chase Ledeek, 456 hitter, 432 bat from Jairo Mendoza, and 6 home runs from him as well. So then you also have a guy like Ledeek who hit 6 homers, but then also walked 17 times and stole 12 bases. He's going to be the star of this team. I mean, there's guys that definitely can hit for contact outside of that. You know, you have John Antrilli, quarterback for Collingswood football, who had 360 last year. You've got Colin Cairns, who only had a handful of at-bats, but there's a handful of names that I think are gonna improve, like Chance Schellenberger is coming back behind the plate for Collingswood, and then you've got Abe Katz, a freshman. If both of those guys can bump up their batting average, I think it's gonna be good. And listen, 332 as a team batting average is pretty darn good. So I think that as we go along in this season, Collingswood was top 10 in team batting average last year. The only teams that they were behind: Cherokee, Eastern, Holy Spirit, St. Augustine, Palmyra, Shalleck, and Northern Burlington. All solid teams. I think that Collingswood's going to have a good year, especially in the offense, but they're a team that I think I can expect a lot of high-scoring games out of, because if that pitching can't hold its weight, then they're going to be in for a little bit of trouble when they get into the offensive side, because that offense can only produce for so long. It can only be so consistent for so long. That pitching's got to hold down the anchor a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. Collingswood, it's another team. It's kind of one of the other teams you talked about. They're going to have to figure out the offense. Collingswood's going to have to figure out the pitching, because, like you mentioned, the offense can score. We're not worried about that, but can they keep it up all season if the pitching's rough?
West Effort will be the next team we'll talk about. 16-11 last year. One thing I'll say is that it's incredibly impressive to have 5 teams in a division and have all of them finish over 500. You know, John Oler's been leading this team for quite a while now, and they've definitely had their great seasons. I mean, you know, they had a great run in 2018. 2019 was the year that they won the sectional championship over Haddonfield. You know, post-COVID, we're talking a handful of seasons right around 500. They were below 500 in 2024, so this was a good rebound for them. Going from 10 wins to 16 wins is certainly an improvement, but they had a decently large senior class. Big names that stick out to me are Caleb Delaney and Cole McKenna. Cole McKenna now at, I believe, Old Dominion, and I know he was originally committed somewhere else, and then he flipped his commitment to Old Dominion. But then Caleb Delaney, who's now in center field for Rowan College Gloucester. So this team didn't have the highest of batting averages. They hit 284. But what was interesting for me is that 4 home runs in the season in an incredibly hitter-friendly ballpark in Union Field. They might not have the same amount of power in their bats, but they're going to definitely get on base. I mean, they had 110 walks. 20 of them came from McKenna. 15 of them came from Caleb Delaney. But I'll talk about Caleb Delaney's younger brother, Landon Delaney. Hit 284 last year, had 9 walks, 16 RBIs, 25 hits as a sophomore. I think that he's going to be pretty impressive, and he's going to hold down the weight at third base that Cole McKenna's leaving.
Yeah, and Landon Delaney, another good two-way star. He threw 58 and 2/3 as a sophomore last year.
Workhorse.
Yeah, with a 2.74. That's pretty something to be proud of there. And he might even see more this year, because Delaney threw 34 and McKenna threw 41 and 2/3. So the other guys are going to have to eat up innings, but Delaney's going to see another really similar year to the workload of that. And if his offense steps up a little bit more from last year, man, West Deptford could be scary.
They definitely could be. And like I said, they have an extremely hitter-friendly field in Union Field. Only 350 to center there, which isn't much better than Audubon's at 354. But, you know, listen, 3.28 ERA. What sticks out to me is that they only had 7 pitchers last year. I think there's some teams that will bring in other guys to throw like an inning or 2, but they had Zach Carson throw 6. They had Josh Panetta throw 4 1/3. But then everybody else with workhorses. Cole McKenna threw 41, and Landon Delaney threw 59 innings. I mean, to have that much for Landon Delaney as a sophomore shows that John Oler trusts him. And the one thing that concerns me for West Deptford is that, you know, you can't really be a one-trick pony in baseball. You can be in basketball, but in baseball you got to have what it takes to make those wins count. I will give West Deptford credit that they schedule a lot of great non-conference opponents this year. Vineland is one of them that I know of, but looking at last year's slate, they beat Holy Spirit. They played Cumberland and Clearview in the Pop McKenna tournament. Clearview was a very solid team last year. They lost to Northern Burlington in the first round of the Diamond, but then they also played Triton, Glassboro, Delran, GCIT, and Vineland again. Handful of solid teams that really could, really could improve West Deptford. That's why I say that non-conference scheduling matters. So I'm excited to see West Deptford again. I don't know how they're going to hold up in the division because
Yep.
I think Haddonfield and Audubon and Haddon Heights by extension, I think are going to be your three contenders. Collingswood is going to have a mix for Group 2, but I don't know if they're going to have a mix for the division, if that makes sense. I think that the division is powerful enough, but if Collingswood plays their non-division games well, and if they play their non-conference games well, they'll get a high seed in Group 2, and I think that they'll still have a chance at the sectional final.
Agreed. I mean, like this division and that group two, it's going to be a dogfight. These teams are going to beat up on each other nonstop. And if West Deptford, like you said, wins those non-conference games, maybe they have some momentum going into the going into the division games, and hopefully get some help from the other teams.
Well, let's flip over now to the Colonial Patriot Division. We're going to talk about Tad Kozaneski's Sterling Silver Knights, 19-7, 8-0 in the Colonial Patriot. Gave up the second fewest runs of any team in their conference. Audubon gave up 81. Sterling gave up 87 runs. This is a team that doesn't have an entirely crazy script of offense, but the pitching is what got them over the finish line last year. I mean, this was a renaissance season for Sterling, definitely put themselves on the map. They had some okay seasons. I mean, listen, they were 9-10 and 3-18 in Chris Hoffman's final season. Tad Kozaneski took over in 2023, and they went 8-15 in his first year, a 5-win improvement. Then they go to 2024, and they only won one extra game, 9-16. But they go directly from 9-16 to 19-7 and an 11-1 start for Sterling. They didn't even really have that bad of a stretch in May. They still had a stretch where they won 5 of their last 6 games, but then West Deptford was a little bit too much for them. They beat them in the regular season, but they fell to West Deptford 4-0 in that Group 2 semi. But there are so many talented teams in Group 2, and another team that we'll talk about later, Gloucester, also in that bracket, fell to Overbrook 5-1. So for Sterling, it's another team that had a big senior class. Looking at the 2025 roster, Anthony Gogolski, two-way player at a 2.78 ERA in 40 innings. He's now at Rutgers Camden. You have Luke Lomax, who's coming in now to his senior season. And then Evan Miller, really liked his play, 461 average. He had the build of a power guy, but was really a sneaky, like, doubles gap guy that would get the ball anywhere where it would get down. Didn't have any home runs during his senior year, but sad to see him go because he was a strong first baseman, and I think now Luke Lomax and David Johnson are going to battle for that position in the spring camp. But then you have Nate Schwartz coming back as the catcher, not a high batting average, but more of a defensive guy. And then Aiden Gates, one of the best pitchers in a small sample size last year. Luke Lomax is going to come back on the hill. But the big thing is that Sterling had their secondary players stick around, like their supporting cast, if you will. But the stars are what's gone. The 1-2 punch of Vaughn McVeigh and Casey Kozaneski were so good last year. Vaughn McVeigh, 1.95 ERA, 40 Ks in 46.2 innings. And he's a bit of a shorter kid, I think like 5'10", 5'11", but he had such a great break on that breaking ball that you could never tell if it was a curveball or a changeup until it was too late and you couldn't read it. So he's now at Immaculata, but then Casey Kozaneski, I'm not sure where he is. I believe he's at Rowan, although I'm not sure if he's playing there. But either way, he had a 2.66 ERA. And we talk about Coach's Kid a lot. This is an instance where it was deserving because he's a genuinely talented ball player. But the guys that are returning, you've got Gavin McCormick and Luke Lomax, the guys that I'm most excited about. I think that Nate Schwartz and Aiden Gates are going to have 2 pretty solid seasons for Sterling in the pitching department. But when you have a really small team, Sterling, I am surprised that they're even a Group 2, if you ask me. I think that their school looks really small, and the roster sizes are pretty small. So to have them be a Group 2, they're certainly fighting an uphill battle.
Agreed, and I'm going to get straight to the point with Sterling. I'm worried about this team, and one reason in particular is because, first of all, they lost a lot. They lost like everybody, and the people they have, like the backups, they didn't see much playing time. That's one of the problems. I mean, like these other teams we talk about, even like not the Stars, they see a lot of playing time. With Sterling, they didn't. So how are they going to compete with that against first of all, such a talented conference and a really good group?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Colonial Patriot is going to be kind of a weird division because you had four teams that finished under 500. You have Sterling, Haddon Township, Gateway, Gloucester, Paulsboro. I honestly think that given the size of the senior classes in 2025, the two best teams in the division are probably going to be Haddon Township and Gloucester. But then I feel like Haddon Township is going to be the best team in the division. But at the same time, I don't know where to pin Sterling against Gloucester because Gloucester also had a huge senior class. They had guys like Mason Johnson and Russ Medler, um, Anthony Strazulo to name a few, um, Jason Hall, great lefty pitcher, and Gavin Zane. So they both are kind of going to be in their own right, and that's assuming that there's no changes in the division. They could. I doubt that they're going to switch West Effort and Sterling. I don't think Sterling's going to go up to the Liberty. I'd have to look at the individual schedules to see who is actually getting moved. I don't think anybody's getting moved. That's the thing. So the only difference is that in 23-24, Sterling was in the Liberty, and the Patriot only had four teams. It was Gloucester, Collingswood, Haddon Township, and Gateway, and Paulsboro was the sixth team in that division. So then they made the switch. They made it 5-5. Haddonfield, Audubon, Collingswood Heights, and West Deptford. Then in the bottom half, in the Sterling, in the Patriot, Sterling, Haddon Township, Gateway, Gloucester, Paulsboro. I don't really know where these teams are going to line up just because it's that wide open. But it's not like Haddon Township was scot-free with the senior class either, because they had guys like Andrew Wolford. Wolford hit 375 last year, and a handful of other guys like Chase Machini was a decent pitcher. But I think that when it comes, I'm grasping at straws for Haddon Township, and I think that even further bolsters my point that I think Haddon Township is going to be the team that is best prepared for the Colonial Patriot. And I think now that we're done talking about Sterling, we might as well transition and talk about Haddon Township. I love the coaching style that Nick Delgado has. Not afraid to play a lot of different teams. Not afraid to see a lot of different teams. Not afraid to pack a lot of games in. They went 8-18 last year, or rather, excuse me, yes, 8-18, 6-2 though. 6 of their 8 wins came in the Colonial Patriot. But the teams that they did play that were not in their division, or in their conference rather, was Overbrook, Group 2. Then you have Pittman, you have Cinnaminson, another Group 2. Cherry Hill West, Group 3. And then Shalleck, the Group 1 South Jersey champions. Cherry Hill East, and then Highland, Group 3. East, Group 4 as well. Florence, a Group 1, but in Central Jersey. Then you have Deptford, a Group 4. Holy Cross, a decent non-public. And then Middle Township, another Group 2. They really prepared themselves for the PowerPoints, and they ended up only drawing a number 11 seed, but they only lost to Woodstown by 1 run. It was a 1-0 shutout to Woodstown, and it was a first-run inning. That's really all it was. It was an RBI or whatever it was. I think it was a bases-loaded walk or whatever. Whatever it may have you, this Haddon Township team was 1 run away from upsetting Woodstown in the South Jersey Group 1 playoffs, and while their record doesn't look too menacing on paper, Delgazo's had good seasons before, and Haddon Township's been successful before. So I'm not going to be the kind of person that's really going to count them out this year.
Me either. I think if they prove themselves, they're going to be good, and people are going to take eye to that. Um, uh, Woodstown went on to the semifinals. They upset Pennsville up there at MSI because of all the rain that we had last year. But Haddon Township, they lost a couple guys, but to lose to a Woodstown team only 1-0, and you were 10 games under 500, I think that's something to be somewhat proud of going into the next year. And if Haddon Township can make that jump, they're going to be good and compete in this division.
Yeah, I mean, Haddon Township, again, another team that's like a guy like Tyler Castro he's committed to, I want to say Franklin Pierce, if I'm correct. Or that might be Jack Jantorno. I'm going to have to get my names right. But Jantorno, 3.75 ERA. You have Mickey Coyle, 3.15 as a freshman. And then you got DeCastro at a 4.13. I mean, the ERA of the team collectively is a little high, but there are some guys on the back end of the bullpen that are making that happen. But you have 3 pitchers. You would basically a 3-man rotation, if not 4, that all pitched basically the same amount of innings. We'll talk about Sean Crawford at 27, Tyler DeCastro at 37, Jack Jantorno at 37, and Colin Feely, the sophomore, at 35. When you have that many pitchers at your disposal and all of them are coming back for the next year, I think Haddon Township is going to be able to lock down some games. Even if their offense doesn't have exactly the best tools right now with a 251 average, Haddon Township's pitching is pretty phenomenal, and I think that they're going to be able to win their way into a lot of games that way. And they're going to take advantage of, let's talk about, we said with Sterling, they lost a lot of their pitching. Gloucester lost a lot of their pitching. You could say that Gateway lost a lot of their pitching as well, with guys like Ryan Sieber and one of our guys, that is, and then Sean Green. Sean Green was their best pitcher, and he's gone. So Haddon Township, even though it might not be all that pretty, they might just have found the exact perfect time to be contending in the Colonial Patriot, and I think that division could be theirs.
Agreed. I mean, like, they're non-conference, like you said. They play a lot of different teams. Haddon Township this year, they're playing Seneca. They're playing the rower tournament they have, as always.
Yes.
Holy Cross they're playing again. Defford again. Not GCIT, sorry. Delsey they're playing. That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
And Cinnaminson and Delran. So it's going to be a tough schedule, but they're going to compete with the division teams, and to have all those pitchers back, as you mentioned, that's good.
We'll talk about the Gateway Gators. 7-15 last year. Mike Pietroforte, I don't want to say he struggled to find his footing, but I think that the numbers have been a little bit rocky in his time there. He took over in 2023 for the longtime head coach Frank Alloway, who had some fantastic seasons in 2018. They went 21-6 that year. That was really their year. Had a good year in 2015, 2016 as well. But that was 10 years ago. And Gateway has definitely, in the Pietroforte era, they haven't climbed above 8 wins in his 3 years. Not to say that I don't think that it's a mark on Pietroforte as a coach. I think that he does a good job. But I think that Gateway is a team that sometimes can be, short on numbers and short on registration. They had a 6.58 ERA and a 2.26 batting average as a team, but they have some guys coming back. I don't like to bash on teams that don't have the best record. So I'm going to talk about players that I think are going to make a good impact. This is going to be a team with a strong infield. Zach Brodsky coming back for his senior year, 345 hitter with 2 homers, 13 RBI. I really enjoyed watching Josh Reynolds behind the plate. He is a great defensive out, but also somebody who doesn't have the highest batting average, but you see the potential there. You see the fundamentals are working in his swing. You see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel for Mr. Josh Reynolds. But Matt Steedle, good infielder as well. I think he's going to get a lot of starts this year. But again, I'm looking at the roster, and I see a grand total of 16 players that recorded an at-bat. And when you have that for a Group 1 roster, it definitely can make for a really tough experience. So they were the number 13 seed in South Jersey Group 1. They got shut out by Aiden Stranahan and Pittman. I think the Gateway can have a good season if they put their cards right, but it's going to be tougher now that you lost Sean Green, the two-way guy who really was the anchor to this offense. He had a 274 average, but his talent was on the mound, 2.35 ERA, had 50 innings of work. We just talked about, why am I blanking on the name that had 58 innings? Delaney, yeah, for West Deptford. It's hard to be a workhorse. It's hard to command a team with that much effort, and then when he's gone, how do you fill that gap?
Yeah,
it's really difficult.
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, like you mentioned, these infield guys, they got guys that can play even with the small sample size that they have. In Group 1, we always talk. Some of these Group 1s are going to struggle because they don't have the numbers, and it's tough to see. But Gateway, if they like you said, if they play their cards right, they can compete.
Absolutely. Gateway, again, 7-15 last year. We'll talk about Gloucester for our last preview of the Colonial. Going into 2025, I think a lot of people were down on Gloucester because they had just won a sectional championship, but they had also won it with a large roster of seniors. I wouldn't say I am even more concerned, but I think that it could be more of the same. They hit 221 last year, but had a 3.7 ERA. I think that one guy that's really holding it down is Kevin Bolden. He's a freshman, 4.07 ERA, 27 walks, but 37 Ks in 32 innings. Those are numbers that can very easily be polished up as a freshman. I mean, he's a two-sport athlete. One of the things about Kevin Bolden is that he's already been thrown into the fire in the sense that he's a freshman who was made the starting quarterback of Gloucester football as a freshman and now is being put into the starting lineup and into the rotation of Gloucester baseball. There were four games that he pitched in where he had 5 or more innings. He pitched 5 versus Sterling, 6 1/3 versus Gateway, 6 versus Paulsboro, struck out 13 versus Paulsboro. This is a kid that definitely has a lot of potential. He's a 288 hitter at the plate and just about a 4 ERA on the hill. But they were 9-14, 2-6 in the Colonial Patriot. I still give them credit. They tried to play a lot of teams that were in Group 2 or Group 3. They played the Kelly tournament, won that. But the thing about Gloucester is that it's a tough division, and this Colonial Patriot division specifically is going to be really hard to judge. So, again, Sterling, big senior class. Gateway, pretty large senior class. Gloucester, pretty big senior class. I think that all roads kind of lead to Haddon Township maybe taking advantage of these guys. And for Gloucester, as much as I love them, listen, they won the Group 1 sectional championship in 2024. Ain't something you can take away from them. It's their first in 50 years,
Yep.
and they definitely had a great season that year. But to go from the highest of highs, a Group 1 sectional, to a 9-14 season, it's hard to get people rejuvenated from that, and hopefully Gloucester can have a good year.
Yeah, agreed. I hope they do have a good year, especially after 50 years, man. That's a long time, and the reward for winning that sectional championship, they got bumped up to Group 2. Um, but
That's my thing is that I'm not too thrilled about them getting bumped up to Group 2 because they could be a lot more competitive in Group 1, but it's hard for me to hold my heart out to Gloucester when they are a Group 2, even though it's not their fault that it's a Group 2 because that wasn't their decision. It's not like they voluntarily moved up. They won a sectional championship and then immediately got the boot and moved up. They could be a top 5 seed, a top 8 seed maybe in Group 1 if that's where they were, but they're not, and they were the 10 seed in Group 2, which I feel a little bit unfair to them, but it is what it is, right?
yeah, you got to play with what you have.
Got to play with what you got.
But Kevin Bolden, as you mentioned, if he can keep the walks down, he's going to see a lot more innings this year with the departure of Jason Hall, who graduated. He threw 44 1/3 last year. So if he can keep the walks down, the pitching staff, I think, around the same point as they were last year at the 3.70 team ERA. But Gloucester, if they beat Haddon Township, they'll be there at the top of the division. That's what we said, that this division's hard to predict because of all the teams losing a lot.
Well, let's turn our cards from the Colonial to the Olympic. We combined both of these divisions for the sake of, for the sake of clarity, for the sake that instead of recording 3 episodes in a week, let's try to combine them all together into one marathon of an episode. Which I am not ashamed of. I think that people can.
We're only about an hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. If we're combining 2 divisions or 2 conferences, think about the Tri-County episode next week on Wednesday. That's some like 20 teams.
Asleep.
Yeah, I got some vitamin water energy drinks. We can tackle some of those, but I think that it goes without saying that there is one team that deserves to be called first in the Colonial or in the Olympic. And it's the Cherokee Chiefs. Group 4 state champions, really one of the greatest seasons in South Jersey in a long time, 28-3. Their 3 losses were to Haddonfield and Eastern, and then they picked up a post-cutoff loss to Delran, which I think they weren't starting all of their starters. So 28-3 with one of those losses being to a Group 2 sectional champion in Haddonfield, and the second loss being to Eastern, the team that was right behind them in the division, and then they also made it to the Group 4 final round. So Cherokee really almost had an undefeated season. They were really close to it. I think that it's pretty I think that if you told me to make a preseason ranking right now, I'd put Cherokee number 1. And
well, how couldn't you? I mean, like
how couldn't you? Yeah, it's pretty obvious at this point. 9-1 in the Olympic American, 333 average at the plate, which, as we said, is best for 7th, and then for ERA, they were fifth, 1.48 ERA on the Hill. And then you have Cooper Birdie, who was committed to Tennessee, flipped his commitment to Starkville, Mississippi State. He had a 1.43 ERA. This is Cooper Birdie, number one pitcher in the class of 2027 for New Jersey. The thing about him is that he only pitched 14 innings last year. Kind of like how Jack Nichols is committed to Tennessee, but he had an ERA of 4. These players are being scouted not based off of the numbers that we're reading off the paper. They're being scouted based off of evaluations and travel ball tournament play and everything like that. You might not get an offer directly from your high school path. You might get one in another way. But with the graduating class that they had, Henry Radbill at a sub-1 ERA, he's now at Rutgers. You had Josh Litsky, who, remind me where he went? LaSalle,
Yep.
right. One of the I think 12 or 13 guys that went to LaSalle. Brett Gable, who went to Harvard. The guys that follow up behind him have that experience. Parker New, 2.1 ERA, 20 innings. Cooper Birdie, 1.43 ERA, 14 innings. And Brett Jackson, no ERA, 0 ERA in 9 2/3. I have the confidence with how good Cherokee's offense is that they'll be able to pick up the pieces in what they graduated.
Yeah, I mean, like, this team is so deep. When we did our way too early sectional championship predictions, we said Cherokee, they could win another state championship. And guys, I'm interested in seeing on the mound, Drew Darby, William Patterson commit. I mean, like 20 innings last year, 1.05 as a junior. Parker New, as you mentioned, he threw a no-hitter last year against Seneca as a sophomore. So junior year coming back, we'll see what he has in tail. But for Cherokee, on the biggest stage of all, the state semifinals, first of all, they mercied Hillsborough 11-0. And then they went to the state final against Westfield and shut them out 6-0.
Yeah.
I mean, like, this team was just dominating, and everybody knew it. But Haddonfield and Eastern got through, but then eventually Cherokee got the final word in the sectional championship against Eastern. But this offensive pitching staff is so deep. They're well coached. Mark Petragani, who I'm pretty sure the sectional final win against Eastern was his 200th or 250th win. I might be wrong there, but it was one of those two. But Cherokee, they're going to be good again. The Olympic American, the Olympic Conference is so deep, but Cherokee is that top-notch team.
Yeah, I mean, Cherokee, listen, the history is on their side. They were 22-8 in 2022, won the sectional championship that year over Kingsway. They have been good in almost every single year under the Petrignani era. They were 9-13 in 2018. I would say that, a couple of seasons that definitely were not his best were like 2018, where they only won 5 games. But it's crazy that you can go from a few years ago being down and out and missing the playoffs to now these guys are one of the best, if not the best team in our area and one of the best teams in the state, undeniably. So, and they went from 16-9, they were a second round playoff exit, but they had a lot of hype around them. They were the number 4 seed, got upset by Eastern, and then Eastern ended up winning the sectional championship as a 5 seed. So, as it goes, that 2024 South Jersey Group 4 bracket was super weird with stuff like Rancocas Valley losing the ACIT in the 1v16 game. There's so many things that go into this, but they were mercy ruling really solid teams. I mean, Rancocas Valley, they won that game by 10 runs. Paul Six, they won that game by 10. And a handful more. They scored 10 versus Shawnee, 13 versus Morristown. They mercy ruled Howell 10-0 in the quarterfinal round, and they mercy ruled Kingsway in the semis. Mercy ruled Hillsborough in a state semifinal game. There's not a lot of teams that can do that, and to beat the teams that they have beaten is incredibly impressive. They had 28 home runs as a team. You have Alex O'Dude committed to Arkansas. You have Brett Jackson, who went yard 8 times for a 4.52 average. That's one of the things that is going to be crazy for me, is that if he's doing that as a junior, Brett Jackson is going to have an incredible senior year at the plate, and he's going to be sending a lot of fireworks into the stands.
Yeah, Cherokee, man, it's just, you can't say it, but they're the number 1 team, at least in South Jersey, and maybe even in some people's pools in the States. They're so deep, like I already said, that how are you going to compete with them? Eastern might compete with them. Lenape, they were under 500 last year because the Olympic American, everybody just beat up on each other.
Yeah, I think the Olympic American, I was going to make this point that with the Olympic American, you have a two-horse race at the top, and then everybody else is pretty much even. The 3, 4, 5, and 6 teams, Lenape, RV, Shawnee, and Cherry Hill East, all are, in my opinion, more or less equal. I think that if you put any of those 4 teams against each other on any given day, I'd say, yeah, that would be a darn good baseball game. We'll talk about Lenape in a second, but I do want to highlight the Eastern Vikings. Made it to the state championship game in 2024. We know that very well. They seem to be another team that has a lot of heavy seniors every year, but always seems to have a way to replace them. Obviously, the big story is Logan Dawson, drafted out of high school out of the 16th round by our very own Philadelphia Phillies. But they've got a lot of guys that are coming back, and a lot of guys that can really compete for their positions. You know, you've got a lot of infielders who recorded a lot of at-bats last year. Just to name a few, Landon Burkhart, Cole Pinney, Jake Tolman. But the 2 juniors, now seniors, that I'm going to be paying attention to for sure will be Vinny Melillo and Rich Iucci.
Yeah, the Rich Iucci, he's a good pitcher for them. Vinny Millo is going to RCSJ. He can really play second base really well. He can hit left-handed bat. Another guy I'm looking, Matty G. He's a good outfielder, and he pitched last year, .72 ERA in a small sample size, 9 2/3. But Eastern, they're going to be good again. They're always good. Rob Christ is a really good coach.
Christ,
sorry. He's a really good coach, really talented. And Eastern has, even though they lost a couple guys and the big dog in Logan Dawson, they still have the talent to make a deep run in Group 4.
I want to get Rob Christ to do guest commentary for DWB because he did so much work for GCEN, formerly Channel 5 Sports. He did like a whole bunch of Gloucester County football and baseball. He did everything, and he's such a great play-by-play talent. And he says this. He says the same opening line every single time. He'll say, from the campus, let's say we're talking about Washington Township, from the campus of Washington Township High School, Channel 5 Sports presents high school football. There was a little bit of a pause in there before he says high school football, and there's that emphasis. I love it. He's a great commentator. I wish he still did it more, but the invitation is open, Mr. Christ, if you are listening. Well, I mean, I don't have his phone number or whatever. I'm just saying he's such a great commentator and also such a great head coach. Longtime head coach at Gateway, has been at Eastern for a decent amount of years now, but they've again almost always been good. 25 wins in 2018. You know, probably talking in the last 5 years, they only had one season where they were under 500, and that was 2022 when they went 12-13. They won 25 games in 2024, and they only ran into maybe the best team in New Jersey and Bridgewater Raritan. I mean, they were probably the best, 30-3. You know, you want to talk about great teams. If they ran into anybody else other than Bridgewater Raritan, they would have won that state championship. So to go from 25-7 to 20-7 almost feels like a down year, but it's not because Eastern's just. They're that consistent. They have been, even in their down years, they are still a good team, if you get what I'm saying.
Yep.
So let's talk about Lenape. You were talking about we were talking about these teams that have been relatively equal in the Olympic Conference, and Lenape's certainly one of them. Former Angels pitcher Matt Woods, the head coach over there. They definitely, again, another team that is a contender year in and year out, but Group 4 is so complicated. They were 11-14, even in division play. They lost to Cherry Hill East as the 5 seed last year in their first round of the playoffs, but they definitely got off to a slow start. They were 2-7, ripped off some wins in late April, ripped off 4 of their last 5 at the end of the regular season, but Lenape's had some good talents over the years. I mean, just graduating in this class alone, Ben Warren, who's now over at DeSales University. They've got a lot of guys coming back, though. Not a lot of seniors other than C.J. Green, Michael Kahn, and Ben Warren. They definitely had a lot of their pitching graduate, Derek Friedman being one of them, and Michael Kahn, as we mentioned. But a couple two-way guys, and Jackson Wheeler, he's gonna be fun to watch. They've also got who else was I looking at? Luke Colonna had picked up a couple of at-bats, but also had a handful of innings as well. Dante Diambra, another name, batted .320, had a bit of a high ERA, but I think he can bring that down in his senior year. But I think one of the main stars of this Lenape team is going to be pretty easily the senior Jackson Wheeler.
Agreed, and he might be out a little bit. He just came back from wrestling state qualifier there, but he pitched 39 innings last year, 2.69 ERA. Big build kid, and Lenape. Can they finish over 500 this year? Can they maybe upset some of those teams at the top of the Olympic American? That's the question mark. And Group 4, another Group 4 team, and a really talented group, probably the best group out of the 4 groups in South Jersey, you could say. And their offense, they lost a little bit, but not too much, as you mentioned.
Yeah, they didn't lose that much, and that's what gives me hope for them is that, Eastern had a relatively big senior class, but they always seem to replenish year over year. And then Lenape, they didn't have that big of a senior class, so maybe if the two-horse race is Cherokee and Eastern, then Lenape can kind of be that third horse. But Matt Woods, he's been here for a few years now. He knows what he's doing. He took over for Mike Wasienko in 2024. Went 14-11 in his first year. Went 11-14 in his second year. If they can finish a few more games over 500, I think that they can be pretty good. Lenape's had their handful of coaching changes over the years. I mean, they made a Group 4 sectional in 2017. Phil Fiore had some good seasons over there. But again, this is another team that is about 10 years removed from having just bad years. I mean, in 2014, they were 2-16. Their only wins were over Eastern, who they were having a 19-win season, and over a team from Ohio. So Lenape is a team that, when you look at the history, they've had good years, they've had bad years. They're not like an Audubon team or a Haddonfield team that will be consistently good year over year, or an Eastern team that will be consistently good year over year. So when it comes to Lenape, I have hope for them. I think Jackson Wheeler, Dante Diambra are going to bring some good two-way action to Lenape. But the next team that we're going to talk about in the Olympic American is going to be Rancocas Valley. Now, Rancocas Valley, they do a great job. They've got first of all, they had Jake Bartletta graduate last year. A lot of really talented players on this team. My concern about RV, though, far and away, consistency. This is the second year in a row, 25 and 24, that RV was a top 4 seed in South Jersey Group 4, and they lost in the first round. I still talk about the 1v16 game, ACIT versus Rancocas Valley, because that's incredibly rare for a one seed to lose in any facet of the word, and they lost by 6 runs to ACIT. So that is a season-defining moment, because if you lose as a number 1 seed, people will remember that. And then they went 13-13 last year, and they were the number 3 seed, and they lost again to GCIT. So individually, this team has a lot of talent. Jalen Alvarez, I'm really excited about him. Guy who can really play anywhere in the outfield. He's got a lot of speed. He's a very quick player, but he also gets on base a lot. Had 26 of either walks or hit by pitches. He had 13 of each. This is a team that walked over 100 times. They had a lot of speed. They had Jake Bartletta, who had 16 stolen bases. The guy right behind him, though, Joseph Sprague, 14 stolen bases for him. If you can get on base, that's a good thing. But they got to win games down the stretch. In Rancocas Valley, this is an Olympic American that is very unforgiving. This team used to be in the BCSL as recently as, I want to say, 2021. They moved to the Olympic. They moved to the Olympic in 2023. So it's even more recent than I thought. But you want to talk about teams that got to be consistent. Rancocas Valley is a talented team. They just got to get their stuff together, and they just got to win ball games.
Yeah, we talked off air a couple weeks ago how this is a make it or break it season for them. I mean, they have to win games in the playoffs when it matters most. They have not done that in recent years. And looking at this roster, we just got done talking about Group 1, Group 2. You scroll down this roster, it's like you're reading an essay. It's so many kids on here. But they're deep, man. They got the talent to win games. They just have to win them. That's the bottom line. They got the guys that can hit. They got guys that can pitch. They got talented guys, and they're well coached. Dan Haverstick, don't get me wrong, he's a good coach, but they have to win games in the playoffs, or people aren't going to take notice.
Exactly, and I think that's one thing that should be noted with Rancocas Valley. I mean, let's talk about Connor Whittle. Duke commit individually, great player, great right-hander, got a lot of velocity on that fastball, and I just love his repertoire. It's so diverse. He can really do anything with any pitch, but you were talking about the essay. I mean, they had a individual total. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right year. They had an individual total of 14 pitchers take the mound for at least one appearance, and they have a lot of depth in that regard. I mean, obviously they had a lot of important guys graduate, like Matt Corbish. You were talking about Who else? Who else are we looking at here? Blake Sansoni, Logan Schumard. The big two really were Corbish and Schumard, but Chase Logue, 4.32 ERA as a freshman. That's a number that can really be brought down. I loved watching Chase Logue pitch. Pretty sure it was versus Cherry Hill East through 5 really commanding innings. He led that team to victory.
Yep.
Yeah, Henry Adams. I mean, there's a lot of really talented players, but again, all of that notice gets swept under the rug if they don't win in the playoffs.
Exactly.
And for Group 4, how talented it is, you're given a high seed. You're given a number 1 seed 2 years ago. You're given a number 3 seed last year. You know, I think that Rancocas Valley, again, they're incredibly talented, but they have to win in the playoffs if they want us as co-hosts, or if they want the South Jersey baseball world to really see them as a true contender. I think that's the one obstacle. The talent is there. The individual and the coaching talent is there as well. Dan Haverstick is a very good head coach, but it's team effort. And what did Kevin Minnick say about basketball? If you don't have what it takes, then you're going to turn in your jersey at the end of the day.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you could have a great coach, but he's not swinging the bat. He's not pitching the ball exactly, and they have to get over this hump if they want the recognition, as we mentioned, and they have the talent. I mean, like, their regular seasons aren't that bad. Even though 13-13 last year, and a talented group and a talented division, that's not terrible.
Let's talk about Shawnee Renegades. Last year, they were 5th in the division, 14-12, but only 3-7 in divisional play. It feels like last year was a pretty big downswing for them. I mean, Brian Anderson has led this team to some very good years in his time here in Medford Lakes. And just looking at, 2022 and 2023, they won 22 games both seasons. They went 22-7 in 22, and they went 22-4 in 2023. Neither year did they make it to the sectional championship. So it's a little bit on the iffy side. But again, this is another team that has produced a lot of really talented players over the years. They had Chase Roberts graduate this past year, class of 2024 we'll talk about as well. Ben Hudson spent a year at West Virginia, now really shoving for Penn State over in State College. But as it is, for Shawnee, 246 average in the Olympic Conference, that's a little bit low for my liking. Their ERA was great, 2.78. You have Tim Doherty coming back. Only had 10 innings in his junior year. We saw him pitch versus Cherry Hill West, but then he ended up coming out with some kind of an injury, and then he came back for the playoff run, pitched 3 times in late May. So Shawnee definitely was hampered by the injury bug last year, and I think that they're gonna really enjoy seeing Tim Doherty back for a senior year. They had Nick Pansiera, who picked up some really good innings out of the pen. Caden Mayberry, another high-level commit as well.
Penn, yep.
Yeah, over in Philly. And then you had Cole Anderson as a freshman. He's going to be really exciting as well. 288 hitter as a freshman, going to be one of the top players, I think, in the class of 2028. So if Shawnee can get their act together, I think that they'll be pretty good in the Olympic. But their offense is a little bit on the lower side for what I'd be concerned about.
Agreed. It's another team similar to RV. They have plenty of talent. They got a lot of depth on their team. Mac Hino on the offensive side, he can improve a little bit, just 200 last year. But they graduated a couple guys, like you said, Chase Roberts, that's a big loss. Andrew Tennant on the mound, that's a really big loss. He threw really, really hard. But to have Tim Doherty back for possibly a full season, that's a big improvement by itself. 9 2/3, didn't give up a earned run in those 10 innings. But Shawnee, another team that can use improvement down the stretch in the playoffs.
Yeah, lefties like Doherty. You know, we were talking about Henry Radbill and then by extension Cooper Birdie. Lefties are worth their weight in gold. You know, it's if you're a southpaw who throws well, you are going to be incredibly heavily recruited. Look at Luke Prokofsky at a Shalleck. You know, if you are a left-handed pitcher, only about 10% of the population is left-handed. So if you can do that and you can play well on the diamond, you are bound to be a good athlete. And, you know, looking at what Shawnee's been able to do, again, they won 44 games across 2022 and 2023 seasons. Neither time did they make a sectional championship. It's another sense of, you know, you're not losing at home in the first round, but you're definitely not making a sectional championship. And that's the one thing is that, you know, there's only so much room at the table. we can't talk about every single team as a sectional championship contender. But if you can improve, if you can get back up to those 20 wins, I think Shawnee's going to have a good year. They just have to, I think Tim Doherty is going to be a fun pitcher to watch. It's just going to be interesting how they roll and how they end up finding their way in the Group 3 field. Let's talk about Cherry Hill East, last team in the Olympic American under Jason Speller, another coach that's been there for a while. I mean, this is a division that is full of really, really strong coaching talent. You've got Cherokee with Mark Petrignani. You've got Rob Christ with Eastern. Both of those guys are head coaching legends. And then you have Matt Woods and Rancocas Valley, who are, Matt Woods and Dan Haverstick of Rancocas Valley, that are really, they're younger candidates, but they are also really strong head coaches with experience. And then you've got Shawnee with Brian Anderson. He's been there for a while. And then Cherry Hill East with Jason Speller. They've had some good years, but they were 12-13 last year. They've been a little bit stagnant in recent years. I mean, it's better than 11-15 in 2024. It's better than 7-17 in 2022. But Cherry Hill East is a program that's definitely had some down years since Jason Speller took over in 2015. So now that this is year number 11 for him, they beat their own divisional opponent, Lenape, in the first round. A first-round playoff upset goes a long way, and even though it didn't end it as they wanted to for the Cougars versus Kingsway, they've got a lot of hype. They've got a lot of potential. My player to watch, I think everybody knows who it's going to be. It's going to be Mike Fichetti,
Yep.
Virginia Tech commit. Hit nearly 300 at the plate. I'd be impressed with his hitting statistics, even if he wasn't a pitcher. But the fact that he can do it with both sides of the ball, 47 innings, 62 Ks, already over 100 Ks as a sophomore, could get to the 200 mark if he so continues on that path. But for the pitches, for the experience that he had last year, it was phenomenal.
Agreed. Mike Fichetti, man, he's one guy to watch, and he's really talented. And a couple other guys, the Haddock brothers, they're good pitching-wise, and Dylan on the offense with 293 average last season. Cherry Hill East, another team that can use some improvement, and I think in the Olympic American, it's really the race for those top two spots, and then who's going to fall in there at third between Cherry Hill East, Lenape, and Rancocas Valley at the end of the day. But Cherry Hill East, to get a playoff win, that's something under Jason Speller. We'll see how they do this year. I think they have the talent to do it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when we talk about divisions and we talk about who is going to finish where, who is going to win what division, it should be stressed that you don't have to win your division to win a sectional championship.
Yep.
Eastern made the sectional championship, and then they lost to the team that won the division. When they won in 2024, I'm pretty sure Eastern didn't win their division outright. I'm pretty sure Cherokee won in 2024. And, well, I mean, I have it right in front of me. I'll check. But then they won the sectional championship. So who am I to say that a division championship or lack thereof really determines your fate? I don't think that it does. I mean, as much as we talk about a division and a division championship, yes, it matters. It means that you play well versus the teams that are squared up against you. But at the same time, division and regular season play and NJSIAA playoffs, the NJSIAA doesn't care that you won your division. It's entirely arbitrary to them. In the PowerPoints, it matters who you play. It matters who you beat. It matters who you play. And that combines in not only your division, which rewards teams that play in tougher predicaments and tougher divisions, like the Olympic American, and it also benefits teams that play strong non-conference opponents. So it's a mix of both. But at the same time, a divisional championship does not mean you're going to get – it's not like March Madness. If you win your conference championship, you get an automatic bid.
Yep.
Just because you win your division doesn't mean that you're going to get a high seed in the NJSIAA tournament. So for Cherry Hill East, they were the 12th seed, even though they finished last in their division. Looking at the Olympic American, though, the funny thing is that for Group 4, you have Cherokee, Lenape, East, RV, and then Eastern. That's 5 out of the 6 teams in the same division that are all competing for the same playoff bracket. That's 5 out of 16 playoff slots going to one division. And then the one that isn't is Shawnee because they're Group 3. Yep. So, Cherry Hill East is a team that really is punching up. Even though they're Group 4, they're always playing tough teams, and I think that this is going to be a year that Cherry Hill East is going to have to rely on Mike Fichetti. They're going to have to rely on some of their other hitters like the Haddock brothers, and we could talk about Nate DeKegerland as well, good defensive out in center field or in the outfield rather. Um, but they had Austin Hannay graduate last year. I was really a fan of what he did. He was a bit of a rare case where he transferred from Cherry Hill West to Cherry Hill East. Not a lot of players do that, but he definitely caught a lot of people's eyes with another lefty ace. So as it goes in the Olympic American, there's only so much we can talk about, but they seem to have a lot of their ducks in a row. And for the 6 teams that are representing the American this year, if I would like to see one change, I want to see Eustis in the American. I'd want to see East and Eustis get swapped because I think that first of all, East and West playing each other twice a year would be cinematic.
Yeah.
And second of all, Eustis versus Cherokee, Eastern, Lenape, feel like they would really deserve a seat at the table. But that is not my decision to make. And at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do in terms of scheduling to make everybody happy. And guess what? You're not going to make everybody happy no matter what. Let's talk about Bishop Eustis, champions of the Olympic National, 22-7 last year under the legendary Sam Tropiano, winningest head coach in South Jersey history, 10-2 in the Olympic National. Their losses were pretty much all quality losses, or they were punching up to the American. Cherokee and Shawnee in early April, they lost to them. They lost to St. Augustine in mid-April. And then, they beat Eastern once, and really the rest of them, PVI and Cherry Hill West, were their only National Division losses. But then they lost to Delsey in the Diamond quarterfinals and then lost to Gloucester Catholic in the non-public B sectional final. So how do we address Bishop Eustis here? Because they have so many guys that have graduated this past year and are now headed to Division I colleges. You've got Lucas Edwards, Eamon McDermott, and Cole Williams, who's headed to Army West Point. But I'm sorry, Williams is a junior. But there are so many players on this team that could go anywhere, and this team is as deep, if not deeper, than any other team in the conference. They've got everything.
Yeah, they're one of the best teams in the conference with Cherokee up there. We talked earlier in one of these podcast episodes, Bishop Eustis in the playoffs. Can they make the hump over to Gloucester Catholic? Maybe this is the year. They're really deep. They lose a lot every year. That's one of the things because they're a non-public private school. But they always have good freshmen coming. They always have somebody next, and they're really, really well coached.
Yeah, a guy like we could talk about Dante Matarese
Yep.
and Roman Fiola, 2 really strong outfielders. Matarese hit 3 home runs for the Crusaders last year. But then you've also got strong defense in Gabe Rogers, one of the best pitch framers in South Jersey, can really turn any ball into a strike. And then J.J. McLaughlin, another guy who is a great defensive out and great infielder, great at turning double plays, good first step at third base or wherever he is on the diamond. Mason Rosenberg, 222 average last year, but hit a home run, 14 walks, and 13 RBIs. So for a Bishop Eustis team that drove in 139 runs, batted over 300, that ERA was 2.48. Yeah, non-public definitely there's a bit of a different charm to it, but they had everything going for them last year, and they went 10-2 in the division. The Olympic National is probably going to be a 2 or 3 horse race this year with guys like Cherry Hill West, Morristown, and Paul Sixth. It's going to be tough to judge who's going to take care of that national if Eustis is going to stay in the national at all.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
This year they are because the schedules we've seen, Seneca's playing them twice.
Okay, good to know then.
Yeah, but I would like to see them jump up to the American. Could you imagine Bishop Eustis Cherokee 2 times a year? I know Cherokee handled them pretty well last year.
But the more you play them, the more
Exactly.
there's a chance those games become close.
I mean, like we could cover both of them. I mean, like that would be 2 good games between the 2 top dogs in the Olympic.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Morristown Quakers under Mike Appalucci. Went 12-11 last year, but 8 of their 12 wins came in the division, and this is another team that really plays a lot of tough competition. Part of it was by choice, part of it was by circumstance. Lost to Shawnee in the first round of South Jersey Group 3. Morristown was the 11 seed, held them to their own though at 6-4. But I'm looking at their schedule. They held Northern Burlington to a 3-1 ball game for the 28-2 Northern Burlington team. That is our last game of the regular season, by the way, on our DWB schedule. And now that I'm remembering it, we will just preview the DWB schedule next week,
Yeah.
or on the Wednesday, or even if
I
we
was going
do.
to remind you, but I didn't know if you changed something.
Well, we're an hour and a half into
Yeah.
this, and we have 43 games we're doing this year, so maybe maybe it's a good idea. And at the same time, most teams aren't beginning actual play until the 30th anyway, so we can probably get away with doing it between Wednesday and next week. But yeah, Morristown, 12-11, held Northern Burlington really well. Played Christian Brothers in the Coaches versus Cancer. Beat Holy Spirit, fell to St. Augustine in the Diamond second round. Just looking at what this team is capable of, I mean, they were again another team that combined a good average of their hitting with a good ERA, 296 at the plate, 335 on the mound. And I know that I'm sure somebody's screaming at their TV, those two numbers do not define a baseball team. I know that. I'm fully aware of that. But what I will say is that in the land of Morristown, what they've been able to do, they definitely lost a lot this year. And I think that it's going to be a chance, if they're not careful, for other teams to leapfrog them. You know, you had on the mound, at least, you had Travis Jarrell, who was another really solid pitcher to watch, 50 Ks in 50 innings. You had Ryan Scott, who had a handful of innings, but their pitching is not what I'm concerned about. It's the offense, because they had Zanichi Steve, Ethan Tolbert, and Chase Kroberger, who's now at Alabama, and Tolbert, who was originally committed to James Madison but flipped somewhere else. Those were three really solid hitters that are all gone, and who is going to replace them? I think the guys that are really going to stick around probably going to be Joe Finazzo. They're Brennan Pica maybe. There's a handful of guys that and then Aiden Milligan, who's now at Camden County College after his graduation. So Morristown was a very senior-heavy team. I'm not even concerned about the pitching. I'm really worried about this offense.
Agreed. The offense. I mean, like, you lost three really really good hitters, and one, two Division One, and Ethan Tolbert was committed to two different Division Ones before going to a JUCO down in Texas. I forget the name of that school, but they lost a really good catcher, Aiden Milligan, as well. I mean, like, Moorestown, the offense is the question mark. I'm not too worried about the pitching with Brody Kelly and Ethan Slaughter, but the offense, they're going to have to pick that up to maybe. I don't think they're going to outdo Bishop Eust this year for the division title, but Group 3, another good group. So Morristown, they're going to have to find the offense to beat those teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, really, who knows? I mean, it's an open book in the Olympic National. I do think that Bishop Eustis will win the division, but it's a little bit too early because we really don't know what's going to happen from March 23rd to May 16th, the cutoff. Let's talk about Cherry Hill West. Dan McMaster, head coach over there, does a fantastic job as always. 16-12 last year. They've had some big graduating classes in the last few years. Obviously, the big name was John Young Jr. and Ryder Garino. Garino now at South Carolina. John Young
NC
Jr.
State.
Oh, I'm sorry, he did transfer. You're right. To NC State, the Wolfpack, and then John Young Jr. at Alabama. But this team was really sneaky with their pitching. We saw them once last year, and they lost 1-0. I mean, Tim Doherty had the best game of his truncated junior year, had the best game of his season that day. But Cherry Hill West, unnoticed, I guess, did the same. And the guy who threw 5 1/3 of unearned run shutout baseball, as in he gave up 1 run, but it wasn't his fault, was Isaiah Pierce Gonzalez. 1.89 ERA, 54 innings, another really strong arm that induces a lot of strikeouts. This is a Cherry Hill East team that struck out 200 batters, 200 opposing batters last year. That's impressive. And a 320 average at the plate. I would say that they're, dare I say, underrated going into 2026.
I would agree. I mean, like, they still have Dan McMaster, as you mentioned. He's doing a really good job over there. But the pitching, I'm not too concerned about. IPG, like you mentioned, they did lose Zach Smith, but the offense.
The offense, they did lose a little bit more than I'm letting them lead on, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, but they still have the guys. Hayden Baker, catcher and right fielder, according to NJ.com. He's really good behind the plate. In my time seeing him, Grant Fournier, they lost Holloway as well. But
who's now at our CSJ Cumberland.
yeah, I think they can get over. I think they can still compete. They're have the guys. They have a deep roster as most of the teams in the Olympic.
Yeah, Cherry Hill West. I mean, listen, Grant Fournier now at Delaware, Josue Holloway at RCSJ Cumberland, Luciano McCree. They did lose a lot, and the pitching I'm not concerned about. I mean, listen, one of the best underrated pitchers in South Jersey last year was Ricky Orlandini, and he's now at Atlantic Cape Community College. But there is a lot to replace there. And with Zachary Smith gone, I think Isaiah Pierce Gonzalez is going to have to hold down the fort. I think Michael Hall is going to have to hold down the fort. Ryan Breeze was a great junior for Cherry Hill West. I think their offense will struggle a little bit, especially versus the Olympic. I think that it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle, but I still think that they can maybe leapfrog Morristown. I don't know where the other teams in this division are going to fill in because they really seem equally talented. I mean, PVI and Seneca seem somewhat equal. Camden Catholic and Winslow seem somewhat equal. But when you talk about the top three, it's Eustis, Morristown, and West. And it seems like Cherry Hill West, I think arguably they were the number two in the Olympic. It's just that Morristown was one divisional game better than them, and that's how it's sorted online. So,
Yep.
if you wanna go off of that, it is what it is. But one of the things that we haven't really talked about was there have not been a lot of coaching changes in South Jersey this year. And one team that did have a coaching change was Paul VI. They brought in Nick Gruber, a former Red Sox draft pick, took over for DM Phillips. Paul VI went 12-13 last year. They beat St. John Vianney in the first round of non-public A. They fell to Christian Brothers, the number 1 seed. PVI, it is weird with non-public A and B because PVI has been kind of perpetually stuck in this era where they've been somewhere between the 5 and 10 seed the entire time. Like, the best are going to be your Red Bank Catholic and your St. Augustine and your Donovan Catholic, maybe even St. Joe's Metuchen, or CBA. But PVI was the number 6 seed in 2021, and that was the second to last year under Gary Sarno. They were the number 11 seed in 2022. Then DM Phillips takes over in 2023, and they host a home game as the number 7 seed versus Immaculata. They did the same in 2024 versus Pingree, won that game 13-4. We were there for that. They were the number 8 seed. And then this year, they were I think it was the number 8 again. And yeah, I'm right. They beat St. John Vianney, fell to CBA. Non-public baseball is really hard to get a grip on because the teams that are in the same bracket rarely play each other.
Yep.
When Paul VI played St. John Vianney, I think it was something along the lines of it was their first time playing each other in 15, 20 years. But let's make an example out of South Jersey Group 4. You have 5 of the 16 teams out of the Olympic American in that same division. You had Lenape and East and Cherokee Eastern. They were all in the same division. So they all played each other twice a year, and the sectional final ended up being 2 divisional teams in the Olympic American against each other. So when it comes to non-public, if you're on the road, you got to travel a long way, either up to Metuchen or down to the Shore Conference, whatever it may have you. They've got to travel a long way. So it's hard to judge, but I'm excited for PVI. Again, they were 12-13 last year. I think that they just need a little bit of a boost to get over the hump. They had Anthony Ungaro, who is, I believe, now at Stockton, had a 1.67 ERA. But they had Tyler Rogers, who is going to be a strong pitcher in his senior year. They had a lot of great talent. I'm excited to see Will Howell come back. He was a transfer from Holy Cross, hit 250 in his first season with Paul VI. And then, there's Nick Shear, who's a great infielder, great bat as well. Batted 292 last year. But I think really the star of the show for PVI is going to be Mason Myers. He had some kind of an injury. I think it was an ankle injury, a wrist injury. You're right. In sometime in the midseason, only recorded 47 at bats, but still hit 2 homers in the hitter-friendly Paul VI ballpark, and hit 319 as a commit to.
Coastal.
He is Coastal. Okay, I thought he was Coastal, and then I backed out of it. So, yeah, you're right. It is Coastal Carolina. But Paul Sixth, looking like they could have a good year.
Yeah, just backtracking a little bit to your point where the non-public teams don't play each other. The first question asked is how far was the drive between the coaches?
That's,
So
that's
yeah,
the first question. It's the
um,
icebreaker.
so for Paul the Sixth, it's kind of hard to judge this year with the new coach, but they have a lot of returning talent. They did lose Anthony Organo, who was a good pitcher, but Christian Williams, who we saw when we had their game against Seneca in early or in late April last year. I'm not worried about this Paul the 16. They have a lot of Division One talent. They have a lot of guys that are going to play college or play baseball at the next level. Uh, and Dolphy, he's a good catcher. But Paul the Six, they're going to compete in the Olympic National again. But can they beat those other teams? They had a stretch of play last year where they played like 6 games in 7 days. I remember us talking about that. That's kind of hard, and they won some of those. I think two of those games were in the Pop McKenna, which had a couple good teams in it.
Yeah, and you were talking about hard to judge with the new head coach. I would argue it's easier to judge Paul VI because Nick Gruber was the right-hand man to DM
Correct. Yep.
Phillips as the first guy off the bench as an assistant coach. And he has head coaching experience in summer league play as well with the South Jersey Grizzlies. So, I think that if it was a brand new head coach who was unfamiliar with the district, maybe unfamiliar with the team or the players, if you're meeting these guys for the first time, that's different. But I think about it in the sense of when Rob Thompson took over for Joe Girardi in 2022 for the Phillies. People were like, well, he's going to be familiar with the team. And that's exactly what he was because he was not new to the franchise. He knew everybody as a bench coach, but then he came in as a head coach and he steered the ship in the right direction. So I think that Nick Gruber can do the same thing. And again,
Agreed.
Paul Sixth's record, I think, is more reflective of them being in the Olympic Conference and less representative of them as a whole ball club. If they were in any division other than the Olympic, I would say, well, they probably would win somewhere between 15 and 18 games. That would be where I would put them. But the Olympic has changed a lot over the years, and just 5 years ago, let's make an example out of it. Washington Township was in the Olympic
Yep.
in that time. Rancocas Valley was in the BCSL. Timber Creek was in there a few years back. And Camden Catholic, Camden East Side, they all fielded baseball teams. My point is that when we talk about baseball and when we talk about what it means to play a tough schedule, if you're in the Olympic Conference, you get a free pass. You play tough schedules every single year. That's what it was when Seneca won those two sectional championships. They played a tough schedule, even though they were in the Olympic National, and they ended up, winning those championships over Haddon Heights, and they had everything going for them. It's just a matter of if you have it at the right time, and in non-public play, that equation is shifted a lot differently than it is if you're in a public school. And while we're at it, let's talk about the only public school or rather the Group 2, the only Group 2 in the Olympic Conference period. Your alma mater, the Seneca Golden Eagles, they went 9-16 last year. I took the reins on Audubon because I'm an Audubon grad. I'm going to let you take the reins on Seneca.
Yeah, Seneca last year, to put it blunt, they knew it was a rough year. I mean, like it was not what they wanted. They wanted to go back to that sectional final and try to get a three-peat. But talking with some of the seniors so far this year, they think they're going to be a lot better. They think they have the talent. They have a really good freshman class coming in this year. Maybe some of those guys later in the season get brought up to varsity. We'll wait and see. But again, last year they played a lot of good teams. The first 4 games were Eastern, Haddonfield, Morristown, Northern Burlington, and then they had a fifth was RV. But the schedule this year, seeing their schedule, definitely non-conference is a little bit more laid back. But you can do that in the Olympic Conference because of how tough that is. But for Seneca, I think they're going to have a better year this year. They have some pitchers returning. Alex Kerr, he was injured a little bit last year. He's coming back. Jack Insiga, who we saw against Morristown, and he got out of that jam to win that game. They did lose Dom Kleinig. They also have the senior Vaughn Worthing coming back, 3.12 ERA last year for him. Alex Argerbyte, they lost. That's a really big loss. He was one of their top players last year. The offense is the question mark, though. Where's the pop coming from? They lost a lot of power. Kyler Trasovka, Alex Argerbyte, like I already mentioned. Nate Park, they also lost. His junior season was really good. He was first team All Olympic Conference, I'm pretty sure. but had a little down year last year with 246. But Seneca, they got to compete. They were 7-5 in the Olympic National. I think Morristown, they should have won some games they lost last year, and that was one of the problems.
Yeah, I mean Seneca again. The standard is high because Greg Sevening. He's a great head coach. Has brought his team a lot of success over the years, and a 9-16 team a year after winning the sectional championship in 2024. It's definitely a bit of a question mark. But looking at what they've accomplished, Sevening has his set. He can put up the banner that you've won 2 sectional championships. They had a 2.75 ERA last year. I'm excited to see Vaughn Worthing come back at a 3.12 mark. Alex Kerr with 1.8 ERA in 12 innings. But again, in the Olympic National, you're going to be playing. I mean, they played 12 divisional games last year versus their opponents, but then you're punching up a lot. As a Group 2, you're going to get a pretty decent seed almost every time, except for last year, where they went 7-5 in their division, but that was mostly because everybody else below them either won. So let's break this down. The top 5 teams in the Olympic National, Eustis, Morristown, Cherry Hill West, Paul VI, and Seneca, all had divisional records of either 10-2, which was Eustis, 8-3, which was Morristown, or 7-5. That was West, Paul VI, and Seneca. The bottom 2 teams, Camden Catholic and Winslow, went a combined 1-20 in the division champion in the divisional standings. So I wouldn't say that the national is top heavy, but you have 5 teams that have had great seasons, and then Camden Catholic and Winslow, and I think you told me that Winslow is not playing in the Olympic this year.
They're not playing the Olympic schedule.
So I think that as it goes, the Olympic National is going to be really hard to judge because everybody else was great, and then 4 of their 7 division wins were coming from either Camden Catholic or Winslow. So, I mean, how do you judge that? And then the one win that Camden Catholic did have in divisional play was Winslow. So, and they didn't even play Winslow twice. Winslow went 3-13, and they played a lot of teams that I don't want to sound mean, but they haven't had the best of years. Camden Eastside, Lindenwold didn't field a varsity team for most of their season, and they're not fielding a team in the Colonial. There's Atlantic City, there's Morristown Friends, Wildwood Catholic. Listen, I respect the fact that baseball coaches have to play who their competition will be good against. If you are completely naive and schedule opponents that are way better than you with the expectation that you're going to win every single one of those games, then, yeah, I don't think that you're doing your team that much of a favor. But to have a team that has historically struggled, in Camden Catholic or Winslow, and listen, Camden Catholic's had good years, Winslow's had good years. Chris Rollins was there back in the mid-2000s, and he got drafted by the Cubs out of high school. They've had good years, but we can't talk about the past all that much, unfortunately. In baseball, we have to talk about the present because in high school, the rosters turn over every 4 years. If you ask me, anything more than 4 years ago doesn't even matter because it was a whole different group of players. So, it's hard to judge. But for Catholic and Winslow, I really don't know how they're going to play. I mean, Winslow, again, not playing in the Olympic, and then Camden Catholic, they were 4-20 last year. If we talk about the American and the National, just to wrap up our point and to wrap up the show, the American, I think, is going to be a 2-horse race between Cherokee and Eastern. And I genuinely think that it could go either way because both teams had a strong senior class. Eastern had Logan Dawson drafted out of high school. And I watched Eastern and Cherokee play each other in mid-May. That game went 10 innings, and Eastern won the game 2-1. Logan Dawson pitched 8 innings. It was unbelievable. But here's the thing. That division could go down to who wins those 2 games. They could split a season series. They could tie for the division for all we know. And then in the National, I see Bishop Eustis being the number 1.
Agreed, yeah.
Maybe Paul 6, number 2, West 3, Morristown 4. I'm not sure. I want to hear your picks on it.
Yeah, I agree on the American. It's going to be between Cherokee and Eastern, and anybody can win. They could tie, like you said. For the National, I think it's Bishop Eustis at the top, obviously, but who fills in that rest? We don't know. Like Cherry Hill West, Morristown, we said they lost a lot. So did Cherry Hill West, but like I said earlier, if these teams beat up on each other, it's anybody's game because of head-to-head and stuff like that.
Yeah. really could go either way. Like we said, there was a three-way tie for third in the division with West, Paul Sixth, and Seneca both having 7-5 records. It's really hard to judge, but I hope you enjoyed what is now the longest episode of the South Jersey Starting Nine podcast. I'm afraid that Wednesday might be even more so with the Tri-County Conference. I mean, there's 4 divisions. There's probably, 22 Tri-County teams, and we only highlighted about 15 teams today. So, or no, we highlighted about 20 because we had the Olympic and the Colonial. But, no, we're going to be back on the air on Wednesday, March the 18th, with right around 6 o'clock for the 7th episode of the South Jersey Starting Nine, where we highlight the the Tri-County Conference. And then, if we have time, we'll highlight the 43-game high school baseball schedule for Dan Wilkins Broadcasting. If you haven't seen it already, check it out. It's our pinned post on Twitter/X at DW Broadcasting and our pinned post on Instagram at DW Broadcasting as well. Check it out there. Your team probably has a game covered, if I had to guess. Listen, with how many games that we've picked up this year, I'll say that just as a disclaimer that or as a preface to our schedule, that just because we have that many games doesn't mean that all of them are going to be played. We schedule more games than we need. I can schedule 20 games in a season and be content with it, but I enjoy the work. I enjoy doing these games for these kids, and at the same time, I think that rain is going to be a huge factor, as it is in every spring season. You know, we talk about April showers bring May flowers. Well, April showers bring May showers. So it's really the same no matter where you are. But with all the rain that's going to come in, you're going to see those games on the schedule, and some of them are going to get bumped because of the rain, and some of them are going to get canceled because of the rain. So the schedule looks impressive as it is, but we're playing it safe with the scheduling because you schedule in every baseball season. We schedule more games than we need to because things can get canceled, things can get moved. So take a look at it. Take a look online, see what may catch your eye, see what may be of interest to you to watch on DWB. Again, we'll be back on the air on Wednesday the 18th. We're going to be back on the air in terms of DWB on Tuesday, St. Patty's Day. I'll be on the call with Jake Clark of Rowan University. We've got a doubleheader between Northampton and Rowan College of South Jersey softball starting at 3 p.m. But I'd like to thank you for listening to or watching the South Jersey Starting Nine podcast. I'm Dan Wilkins, joined by my co-host David Cohen. It'll be